It's time for On Frame, the only weekly soccer-specific radio show in the state of Utah. For the next 2 hours, you'll get insight and information on everything from Real Salt Lake and Major League Soccer to anything happening around the globe in the beautiful game. On Frame is presented by 4 Home Control. Plug into the future. If you'd like to make yourself heard with the guys, pick up the phone and call 877-353-0700. Now, here's your host for On Frame, James Rust, Brian Dunseth, and Trey Fitz-Gerald on ESPN 700.
And soccer fans, we welcome you in on a Monday night edition. This is our new time slot moving forward. We're back to the old time slot, I guess you could say. James Rust, Trey Fitz-Gerald, and Brian Dunseth decided to slide out, now sliding back in. Ready to roll with you for the next 2 hours, talking... Yes, we won't go there. Talking soccer for the next 2 hours here on the program. A lot of RSL talk, Major League Soccer talk. We've got some great guests lined up as well. Just looking to have a good time with you for the next 2 hours. If you want to chime in, the phone line, 877-353-0700 is the telephone number. Again, 877-353-0700, or you can get us on Twitter. You can interact that way as well, at ESPN 700 James, at BP_TOW. Correction, he changed it at
nice timing.
Original Winger. That's the new Twitter address for one Brian Dunseth.
18 EPL games and then 9 MLS games later that night. He just decides to send out a little, oh, by the way, I'm changing my Twitter handle.
The reason being?
The reason being, because for some reason on Twitter, I'm 2 letters short of being able to have the Original Winger on there. So the reason why initially I'd start at BP_TOW was Bumpy Pitch and the Original Winger, trying to bring them both together. But I finally just said, forget it. I'm going to just go Original Winger and deal with it. But now that I know that Trey wasn't happy about my timing, I will now give him a call, text message, or tweet to him to ask him when it's the correct time to change something.
Snail mail in triplicate.
Yeah. Receive approval before moving
I'm just going to go back to my AOL account at some point.
Speaking of Bumpy Pitch, the RSL team store back with the Believe shirts in stock.
Yeah, we got something special coming too.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you want to reveal it right here on Frame?
Well, let's just say as the weather gets a little bit colder, this will come into play, and also don't be surprised if you see a Believe shirt in a different colorway here in the near future.
Right. Colorway, James, that's a fashion term for different color combinations.
Okay.
He's here.
I know this because of my affinity for Kicks culture.
Okay, and I'm glad we have you here. The pop culture, the fashion, anything that we can be brought up to speed on. Thank you to one Trey Fitz-Gerald. So back to being able to interact with us here on Twitter, at ESPN 700 James, at Original Winger, and at Real Salt Lake, unless Trey, you decided to follow fashion and change your Twitter address as well.
There's a lot of Twitter addresses out there purporting to be me, but they're not me. So Real Salt Lake is where it's at.
Okay, so we'll go with at Real Salt Lake. So feel free to tweet at us during the program. We'll get to your questions and things. But guys, let's start with Saturday's win. Real Salt Lake at home versus the Portland Timbers. Their second to last home game of the regular season. You've got to cash in on 3 points. That's absolutely what they did. They did so without Alvaro Saborio. Good to see Javier Morales get in the score column. Maybe even better to see one Fabiana Spindola get into the score column as well. He got things started. Dunny, what did you make of Saturday night's win?
I thought it was a very controlled performance in the first 45 minutes, a very dominant performance. Didn't really see anything from Portland that had me concerned. That being said, in the second 45 minutes, I felt as if Portland had some very good chances. Nick Raimondo, huge reaction save off a snap header. You saw Bright DK, a very, very polished header, a great goal for Bright DK. Just a little soft touch to the far post, beating Nick Raimondo. And then the chance off the crossbar, and I think things got a little bit shaky and nerve-wracking there towards the end. That being said, in terms of quality possession, I thought it was the best 90 minutes I've seen all season from Real Salt Lake, top to bottom. The movement, the passing, the ability to stay calm under pressure. If you go back, and this is what I like to do, this is just me being a soccer geek. When I watch a game, and I really enjoy watching a team move the ball around, I'll actually put it on fast forward and just see the movement again with the ball in a different frame. And I did that for about 20 minutes in the final 20 minutes of the game at the weekend, and I was thoroughly impressed in terms of the movement just by Javier, Will Johnson, Ned Grabavoy, and Kyle Beckerman.
Well, and it kind of the style fit the situation because this Portland team coming in off of the Wednesday night game, really probably more so an emotional game for them. They go up 2 goals on the road in San Jose. They allow San Jose to come back in earthquake-like fashion. Wondolowski getting a late goal and getting the equalizer there, 2-2 draw when they maybe thought they were going to get 3 road points. And really, this is a team that's not playing for anything. They're out of the playoff race, but maybe pride and jobs and things like that are on the line. But as far as playoff experience, that's not going to be happening this year for Portland. And Real Salt Lake, kind of exactly what you said, the possession game forced the Timbers to chase, and Portland just looked tired down the stretch.
Well, and that's a byproduct of having 3 games in 8 days. I mean, on top of the fact that you had an emotional roller coaster of a game where you're up 2-0 in San Jose. And you talked about it. The only thing that Portland can win this year is the Cascadia Cup. And that will forgive all of the ups and downs that this team has dealt with. And you see, it's a team that hasn't won on the road this season. You see how close, how potentially they could have won 2 games this week on the road with the chances that they created. Now, the difference is they're not scoring those goals, and that's been the problem. That's been problematic all season long. But Portland's still a very interesting team because they have a general manager. They fire their coach. They have a general manager who steps down, who's running the team, and they have not seen better results whatsoever since firing their head coach. And now you make the announcement of hiring Caleb Porter, who in a lot of circles was the next big upcoming coach in college soccer. The last college coach MLS has hired is Shellis Hyman down at FC Dallas, and you haven't seen an incredible amount of success, although they did make a run to the finals. And outside of that, he's sitting at home and he's publicly said, "I'm focused on Akron till December 15th." Now, that being said, on a Friday night NBC game, if his team isn't playing at that point, he's going to go home and take a look and see what he has to see what changes potentially he could be making. So that team's just showcasing themselves on top of pride and have an incredible fan base back in Portland that just wants them to do better. And it's kind of that little brother syndrome that they're dealing with. As of right now, they're not even close to being as successful as the Seattle Sounders are being, and that's going to be their measuring stick for the near future.
And Trey, I want to get your thoughts on a couple things. First, the goalkeeping of Nick Raimondo, as Dunny alluded to, he had a couple reaction saves that were top-notch on Saturday night. But then let's also address the goal scoring for Real Salt Lake. That was the big question mark that me and Brian Kamler hit on in the pregame show, saying without Alvaro Saborio, this is a team that's got to find a way to score goals. We don't know how long Sabo's going to be out. Fortunately, it doesn't look like it's as bad as maybe initially thought, but it didn't matter Saturday night. We knew we were without him and had to find a way to score goals, and both Javier Morales and Fabian Espindola did just that.
Yeah, and the most encouraging thing for me, besides, obviously there was a ton of energy in the stadium early, 4 straight sellouts, 7 out of the last 10, 9th of the season. We'll talk a lot about the fans and their contribution tonight. But, you get that early goal from Fabi, who's been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders for 95 days since he last scored 2 at Chivas, where we go this weekend. So, maybe he gets hot here with some confidence. That was just a low burner. He was quoted after the game as saying he thought they might jump, so he hit it low. That opening in the wall was just perfect. But there's so many elements on that free kick. You had Beckerman kind of being a decoy. You had Javi just barely rolling it back with the bottom of his boot, and then Fabi blasting it. And then, Javi's free kick was... There's not a goalkeeper in the world that stops that one. Right. It goes up over the wall, and it just stays like a frozen rope just under, bar level, and it was just spectacular and beautiful. And, I think Javi, his celebration, too, looked like that was a long time coming for him. He had not scored since the San Jose game, very similar free kick, actually, and then hadn't scored in the run of play since the opener at L.A. So, he's been kind of coming back in fits and starts to not only, he's been solid this year, but to find that magic that he was known for and 8, 9, and 10. That was fantastic. But the most telling thing, and I know we started the question with Nick Raimondo, his quotes after the game, Kyle Beckerman's quotes after the game, Ned Grabaway's quotes after the game, I think the fan base was excited and relieved and, we're back, all this stuff. And every guy in the locker room was, yeah, we're happy. We got 3 points. That's what we expect at home. There's a lot of things we still need to improve on both sides of the ball. And so that kind of demand for perfection in light of, I think, my elation, the fan bases, everybody, we talked a lot about we needed a big September with a win Saturday at Chivas. That's 3-1 in this month. And, there were some shaky moments in the second half that I'm sure we'll talk about here tonight. I mean, Fabi could have had a hat trick. There's a couple other guys, Paulo, I think Ned, had some good opportunities where they're essentially in alone on goal. But the fact that we were creating all that in the attacking third, in contrast to what we had seen Tuesday night and what we were thinking about on the 14-hour trip back from Panama on Wednesday, there's a lot to be encouraged about going into this weekend.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to a lot more of that. We'll touch on the CONCACAF Champions League play as well as we roll over the next 2 hours from 6 to 8 o'clock here on ESPN 700. You are tuned in to On Frame. James Rust, Brian Dunseth, and Trey Fitz-Gerald. But here's how the lineup goes. We've got a good one for tonight. Hope you'll enjoy it, and we appreciate you being with us. Coming up on the other side, Nelson Rodriguez. He's the Executive Vice President for Major League Soccer. We're going to talk about a lot of the things that have to do with this league, whether discipline, refereeing. We'll throw all the hard questions at him, I'm sure. JP Dellacamera coming on at 7:20. He does play-by-play and does a great job for NBC and Fox. And then we're going to play back and kind of dissect the post-game press conference with RSL head coach Jason Kreis. So a lot of RSL talk. We'll hit on some national things as well. And Nelson Rodriguez leads us off next, right here on Frame on ESPN 700.
If you're listening to On Frame, brought to you by 4 Home Control, here on the home of RSL Soccer, ESPN 700.
And welcome back in On Frame. James Rust, Brian Dunseth, Trey Fitz-Gerald with you, 6 to 8 o'clock On Frame every Monday night right here on your home of Real Salt Lake, ESPN 700. As we're attempting to reach out to Nelson Rodriguez, he'll be joining us here shortly. He's the Executive Vice President of Major League Soccer. And maybe, Trey, before we get Nelson on, just kind of an overview of some of the things that we might be addressing and the reason why we wanted to bring him on the program.
Yeah, Nelson Rodriguez, Executive Vice President of Major League Soccer, has been with the league, I want to say 12 or 13 years. Before that, he was with the New York organization, the Metro Stars, as they were known at that time. Coached at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. Has been involved with the game at a number of levels, especially for a younger guy. So, State of New Jersey, their whole ODP program and stuff, college, and obviously both the team and league level and the professional. Some of his purview, you see his name talking about discipline, officiating, referees. Nelson is heavily involved on all the competitive aspects of Major League Soccer, so spends a lot of time working with coaches and technical directors and various committees about everything from scheduling, stadiums, reserve league, a lot of planning, looking ahead to the future. So those are the kinds of things that we'll spend the next maybe 15, 20 minutes talking to Nelson about.
So a good chance for us here in Salt Lake City to get a better idea of how basically the office with Major League Soccer operates, and we welcome in right now Executive Vice President Nelson Rodriguez. Nelson, we appreciate you making time for us here in Salt Lake.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with all of you.
Thanks, Nelson. 15 years ago when you were at the Metro Stars, or 10 years ago after you'd been at the league a couple years ago, if I had said that in 2012 there would be a team in Salt Lake City, essentially, that was averaging more than 19,000 fans per game and filling their stadium at 95% capacity, and had made the playoffs 5 straight years in a row, had the longest active streak in Major League Soccer, and become the second club to have 3 consecutive 15-win seasons, and on, those kinds of things. How crazy would you have thought I was?
I would have said to you that you really need to seek medical treatment for that addiction to sniffing glue, because there is, I think only the visionary Dave Checketts could see the opportunity that existed in Utah, and it has been remarkable and very well deserved. And in addition to all the statistics you recite, the true love of the game that the fans have exhibited there and their knowledge of the game is as equally impressive as all of the gaudy statistics.
Yeah, Nelson, kind of my follow-up to that is just, you get a chance to work with Garth and Jason very closely, and obviously, they were players in the early days of the league when you were coming in. Talk real quickly about kind of their growth on the business side or on the leadership side of this sport and this league in this country.
Well, first of all, success on the local level is no accident. The management team of Real Salt Lake is superb from top to bottom, with Bill Manning at the top with the president. Garth Lagerwey is very widely respected across the league by all the other clubs, by many owners in the league, and certainly by everyone in the league office. And he's thought of as being someone who is fair-minded, very rationed in his approach, and while defending the best interest of Salt Lake, also demonstrates the ability to think larger and think of the collective good for the league. Jason has proven himself to be a tremendous coach, and a coach who every player who seemingly has played for Jason has been enriched, has become a better player, and everyone has always indicated a desire to want to stay. So in today's day and age, that's quite a compliment for a coach to have every player who comes in contact wants to stay and fight and play for him. So Jason and Garth are a fantastic tandem. They work great together, and just another sign of why there's genuine strength and foundation for Real Salt Lake.
Nelson, you're a man that spent time with Real Salt Lake, seeing them throughout CONCACAF Champions League and kind of getting that first-hand feel for this group. Before the start of the 2012-2013 CONCACAF Champions League start, Don Garber, there was a quote attributed to him saying that for MLS to take that next big step, we've got to win CONCACAF Champions League. We've got to represent CONCACAF at the FIFA Club World Cup. From New York's perspective, now seeing MLS teams, with the exception of probably Toronto FC, having the opportunity to go into that quarterfinal round, how important is it for MLS to be successful, to go through to that round consistently, and hopefully at some point in the near future book a spot and represent CONCACAF at the FIFA Club World Cup?
It's absolutely one of our key strategic imperatives, and it needs to be. Major League Soccer does not receive the credit it deserves as a footballing league, in large part because we've not had the success at the international level. So it's allowed naysayers, it's allowed skeptics to point and say, well, you're a nice little league, but you can't quote unquote compete. We will win the CONCACAF Champions League, and then we will win it repeatedly. And when we do, we will position ourselves as among the best leagues in the world by performance on the field. And I think if we get someone to represent Major League Soccer in the FIFA Club World Championship, those teams will also see the quality of play that is evident in our league. And so for us, it's vital that we not only have success in winning a CONCACAF Champions League, but in doing so repeatedly.
No, so we saw by far the most active transfer window involving U.S.-born players this past transfer window. When you see Clint Dempsey move from Fulham to Tottenham, and it's only for €7.5 million, do you as a group in New York say, it's not good enough. We still need to see that value in terms of bought, sold, and young guys like Jeff Cameron getting that opportunity to go overseas, and you guys seeing a financial tag, a financial value associated with the players that have really grown up in Major League Soccer and then looking to take that next step. Not just the old school Josies, but right now what we're talking about in 2012.
Well, for certain, when a player in our league has the opportunity to go abroad, or there is interest from foreign clubs to acquire the services of one of our players, we have to consider it. None of the decisions we take right now are really made in terms of finances. The amount of money that we may receive in a transfer is nice, but it's not going to change the economics of the league, and frankly, it's not going to change the economics of any individual club at the figures. So it becomes more strategic minded. Are we transferring the services of the player to a club where he is going to play, so he can continue to be considered for the U.S. national team? Because if you're not playing regularly, you're not going to get true consideration for the U.S. or the Canadian national teams. Also, will they be in a league or on a team that has some spotlight attached to them? Because there's a residual effect. When we transferred Tim Howard's services to Manchester United, and I was fortunate enough to be involved a little bit in that transaction, we actually had a higher paid offer from another club. But we believe that strategically Tim's going to Manchester United would be a better story for Major League Soccer. And I think the punctuation of that story is that Tim walked off our fields and walked directly onto the playing fields of the Premier League and was voted goalkeeper of the year. And that should demonstrate that sometimes the context that's affixed to MLS shortchanges our true quality. So we would like to see the values go higher. We do believe exporting the services of player is a sign of a vibrant, healthy league, and should be viewed that way. At the same time, so is the importing of players and the retention of core players, particularly some players who are going to represent the U.S. and Canadian national teams. We take all of these factors into consideration when we make any individual decision.
Hey, Nelson, kind of along those same lines, can you talk about the emergence of Major League Soccer as really a league of choice for players from other CONCACAF countries and where we are on a club level in attracting Jamaicans, Hondurans, Canadians, other teams from or other countries from our region in comparison to Mexico?
Well, Major League Soccer has two huge advantages, and we need to exploit each of these. When you talk about players coming from South or Central America, perhaps where the economics in the sport are depressed, the big advantage is coming to the United States and or Canada and not only having an increased standard of living, but being guaranteed that on the 15th and 30th of every month you're receiving your paycheck. And we should not discount the importance of that, particularly when even now in Spain you have reports of players in the first division who are in the arrears from receiving their salaries from their clubs. So at Major League Soccer, every player knows that twice a month on payday, they don't need to run to the bank to cash their check. It's there in full. And the other aspect that we need to exploit is coming and playing in this league allows you a freedom that doesn't exist in many other countries. So, from Thierry Henry's ability to take a train to go to Red Bull Arena and play in a game, or to dine the night before the game in a restaurant, these are privileges that are just not extended to players in many other parts of the world that makes Major League Soccer attractive. And lastly, players are recognizing that there is no easy game in our league, and that when they get here, they realize that this is a challenge from 1 through 19, And any true competitor loves a good challenge and loves the fact that they have to compete and fight for every 3 points on a Saturday.
Nelson Rodriguez is our guest here on Frame. James Russ, Brian Dunseth, and Trey Fitz-Gerald along for the ride. Nelson, the Executive Vice President of Major League Soccer. And, Nelson, I wanted to get into the discipline side of things. Last season we saw, in a short span of time, some long-term injuries that kept guys out for quite a while. Our own Javier Morales here with Real Salt Lake, Zach Awani, also David Ferreira going down. What has the league been able to do to kind of clean things up and make things better as far as that goes so far this season and moving forward?
Well, I think it's important to note that those injuries were tragic to the players themselves and to the clubs that they represented, but we really viewed that as a bit of an anomaly. You know, at no other point in our league's history had we ever suffered such devastating injuries to such high-profile and attacking players. Having said that, we were concerned with the perception of the league as being overly physical or reliant on physical play. And our Board of Governors made the decision to address this matter head-on, and so they relaxed some of the parameters under which the disciplinary committee could operate with an eye to meting out more discipline with the twofold or threefold, really, endeavor to first modify player behavior and try to eliminate or reduce the number of reckless and rash challenges that endangered the safety of opponents. Secondly, to modify coach behavior so that they were aware that if they chose to consistently select a player who engaged in such activity, that they would likely find that they would not have that player for repeated matches. And thirdly, to modify the behavior of our match officials, that they would feel empowered and supported to make the decision on the field of play, which is the best line of defense. I also think it's important to note in each incident with Mr. Zakwani, Mr. Morales, and Mr. Ferreira, that we believe the referee on the field got it right in every instance. So it just demonstrates the need for this to be a holistic approach, of which the disciplinary committee is just one facet.
Nelson, it's kind of a random question, but because in the United States we're such a Premier League heavy country in terms of fans turning on the television, and that's what they see at the weekend for the most part, the Monday Night Football aspect to it. How has the disciplinary committee gone about explaining how to the common fan or to someone starting to get to know what Major League Soccer is, why you see challenges on the television on a weekly basis that would, are yellow cards or just hard challenges, quote unquote, and then they look at what an MLS game would go through and some of the decisions being a little bit harder for tackles that might be a little bit soft. How do you go about balancing the definitions and still trying to educate what you guys are trying to accomplish as a disciplinary committee to what the average fan is seeing every time they turn on the television?
It's a great question, and candidly, in terms of educating our public, we've done an extremely poor job. We are aware of what the NHL instituted this year with their player safety channel, where Brendan Shanahan, their lead on disciplinary matters, routinely explains decisions and does so in a very clear fashion. And we would like to institute something similar, and we will institute something similar, perhaps before the end of this season, and if not, certainly in time for the start of next year. And we think that education is not only good for supporters and media, but for the players themselves. The second thing is, there is always these whispers and allegations that this disciplinary committee is a star chamber and it's all very secretive. We're very open about explaining the parameters under which the disciplinary committee can act, and we explain the composition of the committee. It's a 5-person panel. There is an ex-MLS coach, an ex-MLS referee and 3 ex-MLS players. And one of those players is actually appointed by the Major League Soccer Players Union, so that the body of players is represented in that disciplinary deliberation. So we're very open about it, but we need to do a better job of communicating the decisions so that people can understand how it works, why it works, and why certain plays, which seemingly might appear similar, are acted upon in different measures.
Hey, Nelson, kind of a related question that often comes up when you're talking transparency around the committee and its decisions. Talk a little bit about the installation of Peter Walton in the Professional Referees Organization, and is it unrealistic for players and fans and media to expect in, let's say, the next 5 years more transparency with regards to evaluation of referee performances?
Over 5 years, no. That's a very realistic expectation, and I would reduce that time frame. I would reduce that time frame against transparency, and I'd reduce that time frame against seeing a step change in our officiating standards overall. You know, a lot of credit for the creation of the Professional Referees Organization belongs to U.S. Soccer, who heard our desires as a league and was willing to consider and look at a new model, and they are also contributing financially to that independent company. I also want to acknowledge the Canadian Soccer Association, who supported the creation of Pro, and we believe that this is a truly critical positive step for the league and for the state of officiating in North America. Really what the Professional Referee Organization represents is now individuals can aspire to a professional career in officiating, one that encompasses on-field as well as working in an office setting in helping Pro develop. So we're very excited. It's a multi-million-dollar commitment on a yearly basis. Peter Walton has been terrific in his role as the general manager, even through his first 5 or 6 months. We're excited about the plans that he is developing, and transparency is a big part of the future, where fans and the media would be aware of assessments made of officials. And just given this opportunity, I'd also like to say, you know, there is this bloodthirst for referees when they make an error that I think needs to be, that mindset needs to be changed and satiated in a way. You know, you can have an official who makes a mistake in a game. That does not make them a bad official. Just as a goalkeeper who lets slip an easy ball pass, or a forward who misses a duck on the goal line, they don't necessarily lose their job or even lose their next starting assignment, provided they've produced good quality in the past. The same should hold true for an official.
Nelson, you just kind of touched on what my next question was going to be. From being around the league and hearing from the players, hearing from the fans, hearing from the media members, the coaching staffs, one of the questions that's always been placed to me, and it's hard for me to explain it, but I still feel like I understand the reason behind it, is because of the dynamic between Major League Soccer and U.S. Soccer and the referees and trying to find that balance. We're not necessarily ever seeing any true public accountability from a referee who's made a mistake, a missed call, a bad red card, whatever it may be. Now, we do see rescinded, not too often, decisions from a player's perspective. But how do you guys go about explaining the accountability on the players, both during the game and after the game, by retroactively taking a look back? But from a public's perspective, as we get better and better referees, not being able to explain to the general public what the decision was, and if they did get it wrong, how the, not punishment, but the learning curve off of that is.
Sure. I think what you will see, and I say think because ultimately this will be Peter Walton's decision and that of Pro, but I believe what you will begin to see is much like you will see an attempt to shed transparency, greater transparency on the decisions of the disciplinary committee. You should expect to see something similar with officiating through Pro. And there will be different communication vehicles. Some of that will be internal, but a lot of that will be external, whether that's posted on their website, whether that's posted on MLSsoccer.com, or whether that's distributed in another way. But I believe that you will see, officials today lose assignments if their performance merits that occur. What does not occur today is we do not publicly say, hey, Brian Dunseth was removed from his next game because he was not at standard in his previous game or because of an egregious error in his interpretation of the laws in such a game. That accountability is happening. It's not being shared publicly. I think with Pro, with the introduction of more full-time officials, the broader public and the media will start to see that, and Peter Walton or his designee will be the voice of that.
Nelson, yourself, Trey, and myself personally have been around this league almost since the very beginning. Philip Anschutz has had such a huge role in Major League Soccer while really never wanting the spotlight and being in front of the camera. With news last week coming out that AEG was up for sale, that firestorm that hit Twitter and the LA mass media, what effects, if any, would trickle down off a potential sale of that magnitude with Major League Soccer being tied in the way it is with the LA Galaxy, Home Depot Center, etc.?
Well, I wouldn't want to get caught up in a hypothetical. I would echo your sentiments that Mr. Anschutz, his family, and AEG have been tremendous partners and tremendous builders of Major League Soccer, and forever there will be a debt of gratitude that's owed to him and his family and AEG. But the league is very solid and very vibrant, and should it come to pass that AEG sells its assets, we're confident that whomever were to assume those rights would be an equally passionate and positive supporter of the league and of the sport in general.
Hey, Nelson, we could keep you on for the whole 2-hour show, and we'd love to do that sometime. But last question, what is your level of excitement, I guess, as we get into the final month of the season, and we're talking about the knockout game in each conference. We're talking about MLS Cup being at the home of the highest remaining team based on their regular season performance, and in the 2-game conference finals. Talk a little bit about those format changes to the playoff structure and how it's all going to go down to the wire. I think on our side of the bracket, it's going to go right down to that Sunday night game between Seattle and LA before we know where we're playing 3 or 7 days later.
We're very, very excited by this new competition format, and we think it's already in September starting to prove its worth, and we think into the future it'll even prove to be more exciting and more dramatic. And you've nailed it. There's 1 point separating 2 through 4 on the West, and the East is still up for grabs, really 1 through 5. So we think that the big benefit also is the reduction in travel in the latter half of the year. Nearly all of the games are within the conference, and so that's a big plus in that teams no longer have to travel across country, or if they do, they only have one trip. We also think the drama of the 4-5 knockout game will be tremendous, and the penalty, if you will, of being in that 4-5 game is that even if you survive, 3 days later you have a date with the number 1 team in your conference. So we're really excited by the new playoff format, by the new competition format, and that MLS Cup will be played in front of partisan fans is just going to truly elevate the spectacle of that game, and we also believe the actual product quality.
Nelson, echoing Trey's comment, we could keep you all night. Appreciate you joining us very much so. Great stuff. Looking forward to catching up with you again, and really appreciate it.
Guys, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and all your fans, and I encourage everyone to go out and continue to support Real Salt Lake. They're a worthy team and a great champion in the past, and a great opportunity to go for MLS Cup this year.
Hey, Nelson, we look forward to seeing you during the playoffs, and then hopefully on December 1st out here at Rio Tinto Stadium.
Thanks. Yeah, I hope so too. Thanks, guys.
All right. There you go. Nelson Rodriguez, Executive Vice President for Major League Soccer. That was about 27 minutes of awesome stuff.
Ratings gold.
If you missed any of it, it may take a minute to upload because it will be a rather large file. But make sure you check out ESPN700sports.com. We are overdue for a break.
I still had like 8 more questions I wanted to go for.
Got to pay some bills, Benny. You can ask Trey those questions coming up on the other side, and we'll go from there. James Rust, Brian Dunseth, Trey Fitz-Gerald. It's On Frame on ESPN 700.
Nobody covers. This is On Frame, brought to you by 4 Home Control. If you want to reach the show, dial 877-353-0700 right now on ESPN 700.
And welcome back On Frame. James Rust, Brian Dunseth, Trey Fitz-Gerald. Hour number 1 almost already in the books. It's gone by quickly. If you missed any of Nelson Rodriguez, Executive Vice President of Major League Soccer, be sure to check out the website, ESPN700sports.com. Lots of great stuff there on some of the things that the league is doing. A lot of, like Nelson said, they're not trying to keep things secret, but a lot of the stuff they just don't, it's not out there in the public to see, a lot referring to referees and discipline and things like that.
Well, the best thing for me, what he said in regards to the referees, was that very soon there's going to be more of a public explanation. And so what that tells me is down the road there's going to be a full relationship between Major League Soccer and U.S. Soccer that will allow these types of decisions that have largely gone under the cloud of suspicion and never really knowing what happens, to where, he said it, there is accountability. We always knew there were accountability for referees. But for us as fans to know that, hey, that big red card that was, say last year, a Nat Borchers red card and penalty kick 5 minutes in, no, it was wrong. Wasn't even close to being a handball. And on top of that, shouldn't have been sent off. And a step further, shouldn't have been a penalty.
Right.
And so you can actually have some type of physical understanding of when something has gone terribly wrong, there is an accountability for that. But, and what I've always said is it's not about throwing referees underneath the bus. It's about them knowing that the moment they blow that whistle and they're in charge, whether that's as a center referee, whether that's assistant referees, or that's a fourth official, that they will be held accountable. And just like any other player, where the disciplinary comes back in and says, you did something wrong, we're going to take money out of your paycheck, that same accountability is there on both sides.
And it's also about educating the fans, because there's so many times where everybody's up in arms by something a referee did, and they just don't understand the 16 things that have to go through his head that affect a certain situation. And maybe if he got 15 of them right, maybe he got all 16 right, and there's a common misperception. So, that's so much of the dialogue can open up with, Peter Walton starting to do newspaper interviews. We've requested to have him on this show. I imagine that'll happen in the next couple months. Nelson was great. We'll have him on again maybe during the playoffs.
We've got about 2 minutes left before the top of the hour break. Some milestones reached for Real Salt Lake Saturday night. Trey, regarding the fans and regarding the playoffs.
Yeah, the biggest one for me is, I think this organization's been very upfront about feeling the need for more trophies to justify how good this team has been over the last 5 seasons. But nothing says sustained excellence like making it to the playoffs. And again, we're in an era where 10 out of 16, 17, 19 teams make the playoffs. So in the post-shootout era, RSL has now made the playoffs 5 straight years. That's the longest active streak in the league. Columbus can join us if they get out of the East this year. And, there's only a couple longer playoff streaks in the history of the league since the shootout was abolished. So that's something to be proud of. The other thing, with 3 straight 15-win seasons now, and then if we get a point, in any of our last 4 games, we would have 3 straight 50-point seasons. And the only club to ever do that before was the 05, 06, 07 DC United teams. And now LA joined the 15-win thing a couple hours after we did the other night because Toronto just stood around like a bunch of pylons and let Juninho pull the trigger from wherever he felt.
Tell us how you really did.
No, I mean, it was awful. There was no resistance given. So anyway, a lot to be proud of, and hopefully this team will peak going forward in the playoffs, and maybe we'll have another trophy to show for it here on December 1st. But it is exciting and great milestones to reach. Real Salt Lake back in the playoffs for sure. Now it's just a question as to what seed they will have. We got to take a quick break. On the other side, head coach Jason Kreis's post-game conference and JP Dellacamera coming up as well on Frame on ESPN.
You are listening to On Frame, brought to you by 4 Home Control, here on the home of RSL Soccer, ESPN 700.
And welcome back in hour number 2 of On Frame. James Rust, Brian Dunseth, Trey Fitz-Gerald. You can tweet at us, interact with us here on the program at ESPN 700 James, at Original Winger. Note the change of the Twitter handle. No more BP_TOW. Make the change at Original Winger. And at Real Salt Lake, you can tweet your questions, your RSL, MLS thoughts to us, anything soccer-related, fair game here on the program. Now, Real Salt Lake picked up the 2-1 win Saturday night over the Portland Timbers, getting goals in the 14th minute from Fabian Espindola. I believe it was the 36th minute, Javier Morales on a set piece, and then Portland tacked on a goal in the second half from DK. And 2-1 is your final score. Real Salt Lake.
Word.
Say that again?
I think you just invented a new word. 36-ish?
36-ish minute.
That's awesome.
That's kind of a tongue twister a little bit. But anyways, in the 36th minute, Javier Morales finds
and what a goal it was. It's up for goal of the week. So everybody needs to get out to MLSsoccer.com or RealSaltLake.com and vote.
Give it a vote because it was a top-notch goal from Javier Morales. Now, following the match, head coach Jason Kreis spoke to the media as he does always. We're going to let you hear from that right now.
What did you think of the performance from the guys who you said would probably have to step up, especially with Sabo out of the lineup today?
Important. I think it was important that we get really important goals from Fabian Espindola and Javier Morales. Would have been nice to cap it off with a goal from Paulo Araujo as well. But all in all, I think we got big-time plays from a couple of big-time players there in the attacking end of the field.
And you got those goals early. How important was that tonight?
I think it was big. I knew it was going to be difficult for us after a long, long flight from Panama on Wednesday. And it was, I think, critical that we scored early to put ourselves in a position where we didn't have to kind of struggle for it in the end. Oh, wait, we did have to struggle for it in the end on the other side of things. But it was nice to not have to try to be putting on all kinds of attacking substitutions to try to find a goal for once.
And was it a welcome sight to see Espindola shake off that scoring drought and nearly sink 3 goals tonight?
Yeah, for sure. I thought he was really bright in and around their goal. On a different night, he walks out of here with 3 goals, and it's an easy night for us. But it's a step in the right direction, very much so. And I think that his confidence should improve from here on out.
Struggled again late, like you mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about what happened? Was it fatigue? Was it just kind of falling asleep, or what was the situation there?
I think it's a little mix of everything. I think the 2-0 lead, I think, is one of the most dangerous spots you can be in as a soccer team because you just have this tendency, no matter what you say or how you talk to the players or hear them talking to each other, there's just that tendency to just relax and feel like that it's going to be an easy night. And Portland wasn't prepared to relax. They weren't going to give up the game. And they were throwing lots of numbers in their attacking half of the field and serving balls into the box. And that's where the goal came from wide service into the box that we don't do well enough finding our marks in there. So, yeah, I think Portland, let's credit them. I think they made it difficult for us.
We see a sold-out crowd here, 20,000, first home game in a while. What is that? What do you think that plays to the players, that crowd being so loud tonight?
It's important. I think that we're growing accustomed to having sellouts here, and I think that's a very good place to be. I'm hopeful that we're never going to take it for granted because I really feel like it's important for us. It's important for, as everybody knows, we have a pretty good home record, and I feel like the crowd plays a very big part in that.
Jason, what did you like best about your effort in the offensive end and the attack end? Was there one thing that stands out?
I think that we just got more numbers involved tonight. I think there was more options for players when they were on the ball to find passes. I think that we created a lot of very, very good chances through just passing and moving and being dynamic in the attacking third of the field, which is what I prefer. And so, of course, I wish that we had scored a few more and made it more comfortable for ourselves. But we didn't. Again, we're moving in the right direction, though.
Jason, both goals came off set pieces again. And how important are your set pieces, and how often do you guys work on those?
They're important, for sure. But I would say that it's not something that we focus on. And maybe it's something that we could try to focus a little more on. I think that, both of those goals came from just special individual plays. It wasn't like a set routine that we worked on in training. Spindler's strike was fantastic. Javier's, I think, one-upped him a little bit. I think that there's room for improvement on some corner kicks still, though, because there's some goals that need to be scored, and we're typically a team that scores our fair share of goals off corner kicks, and we haven't done that in a long time.
Jason, was that play on the free kick that got Fabian the goal, was that maybe designed to kind of hopefully get him going if he got a good chance, or was there anything
I don't think so. I think it's just a discussion amongst the guys out there, and Fabian probably stepped up and said, hey, I'd really like to get a strike here, and I think they just sorted out how best to make that happen. So, but I don't think it was in anybody's intent to try to bring Fabian out of things.
Jason, it's the third straight year of 15 victories for the team. How does that speak about the consistency of this team to deliver results both at home and on the road?
I guess we should be proud of it. I wouldn't say that I actually knew that until you said it, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be. We booked our playoff trip tonight too, right? For 5 years in a row. So we're obviously doing some things right, and we do need to occasionally stop and smell the roses, I guess, and appreciate the hard work that the guys are putting in. And that's a lesson for me, maybe, to not be so critical all the time.
Jason, you could be in second place by the time the games are over tonight, even alone. Are you comfortable with your position in the table right now?
No, at the moment, before the kickoff tonight, we were in fourth. We've done a lot of talking already, and I'm sure we're going to continue to talk that that's not going to be good enough for us. That's going to make things really, really difficult. We know that. So we're striving to get up to at least third or second.
How big is it to get goals from someone other than Saborio tonight?
It's huge. It's huge. Like we said at the beginning, I think it's, we need more guys to chip in. We need to be more dynamic in the attack. And I'll tell you what, if we're scoring 4 or 5 goals, 2, 3, 4 goals a game, and Sabro scores them all, I wouldn't care because something's going right? If we're getting a lot of players involved in attack and he just puts the final touch on it, that would be fine by me. But we still haven't been getting the right numbers of players involved to be dynamic and to really cause our opponents difficulties in the defensive third of the field. So it's not just the goals, but it is more players involved in the attack tonight. And I think you saw that. I think you saw, Will Johnson have a half chance or a full chance, Ned Grabavoy in the box with a full chance to score, and that's what we need.
You mentioned yesterday that Sabo was maybe in contention to play tonight. How close was he, and when was that decision made?
I told you yesterday, and it came down to very much the truth that, walked into him, have a meeting with him in the office, and I looked at him, I said, you want to play, don't you? Oh, yeah, I want to play. You want to start? Oh, yeah, I want to start. I said, and Tyson, if he falls down, could he injure his shoulder more and be out the rest of the season? Oh, yeah. Okay, then you're not playing. We weren't going to take that risk tonight. This isn't the end-all, be-all game for us. If it had been, maybe we would have, because he really, really wanted it. And I think that I have a tremendous amount of appreciation for somebody that really, really wants to get out there and help the team. But the right decision for the team was to not risk him.
That was head coach Jason Kreis following the 2-1 win over the Portland Timbers, and his final comment there, and maybe Trey, you can kind of bring us up to speed as to the exact condition maybe of Alvaro Saborio. Sabo wanting to play, Tyson stepping in and saying maybe not the best idea.
Our trainer there, Tyson Pace, is who Jason was referring to. Look, Sabo goes down in the box, gets taken down. He has a little bit of pain in his shoulder. He takes a PK. As you can see, he torques his body. I think Gunny identified this. He torques his body because he realizes the keeper's going the way that Sabo was going. Gets the PK, begins to kind of celebrate after the goal goes in, tries to raise his right arm, and just hears all this crunching in his shoulder, and is just overcome with pain, very similar to Dunny's shoulder that he jacked up on the turf at Rice Eccles. But Sabo's a warrior, and he can't lift his arm above, he can't move his elbow more than 2 inches away from his body because of a second-degree AC sprain. This is the same injury that Kenny Mansali had that kept him out for about a month. But, you just got the sense from Sabo, even on the plane back from Panama, so 18 hours after the injury, 24 hours after the injury, he's like, why is everybody thinking I'm not going to play? He didn't, not playing was not an option for him.
Right.
And you heard Jason kind of give his Sabo impression there, which was pretty funny, actually. But
it was actually really good.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Hopefully, we're going to see what happens. Sabo's going to get a chance to prove to Jason if he's fit to play. And if not, you got to have him for that LA game. Nothing against Chivas, but it's been 9 games, I think, since they won. And no disrespect to them, but if Sabo can benefit from another kind of week of rest and get closer to 100%, because he's not going to be 100% for the rest of the season, because he's going to play against LA, hopefully. He's going to go to Costa Rica and play a couple of World Cup qualifiers. He's suspended from the CONCACAF game on the 23rd, and then he'll play for us on the 27th against Vancouver, and then whatever we do in the playoffs. So, that constant pounding, and you heard Nat Borchers with Bill and Hans earlier today. Sabo goes up against guys like Homison and Nat every week and gets the crap beat out of him.
He does it in training session each and every day.
Yeah.
And you go back to the goal he scored. Yeah, it was in the 90th minute. Yeah, or 92nd plus minute. He torques away from the goalkeeper, gets taken down, steps up, and just jerks his body at the last second because it looked like he recognized in that split second that the goalkeeper made the right decision. 10 goals. 10 goals scored in CONCACAF Champions League. 14 goals scored this season. If 4 months ago, we're talking about what Sabo means to this team, it's very evident the importance. And I'd love to jump on and talk about Aaron York's tweet about why Fabian plays so differently without Sabo than when he does off him coming off the break.
Yeah, here's what we're going to do. We got JP Dellacamera coming on in our next segment. We'll talk with JP, and then probably the last 20-ish minutes or so of the program, we'll take some of your tweets. We know we've got a couple tweets that have came in. We'll open up the phone lines, and we'll get a little bit more in-depth with Real Salt Lake. But we've got a break. This is On Frame. Again, JP Dellacamera, play-by-play man for NBC and Fox. He joins us next right here on ESPN 700.
As Real Salt Lake. This is On Frame, brought to you by 4 Home Control. If you want to reach the show, dial 877-353-0700 right now on ESPN 700.
And we welcome you back in On Frame. James Rust, Brian Dunseth, Trey Fitz-Gerald, glad to have you along for the ride here on ESPN 700, back into our original time slot of Monday night from 6 to 8 o'clock. And we're going to jump right out to the phones right now. Welcome in our next guest. He's the play-by-play man for NBC and Fox. Also the walking buddy of our own, Brian Dunseth. We welcome in JP Dellacamera here in Salt Lake City. JP, appreciate you making time for us. Welcome to the program.
Hey, anytime for my walking buddy. Anytime.
All right.
I told you. You thought I was lying. I told you.
JP, do you refer to Dunny as your work wife?
No, walking buddy is fine. That will suffice. That's good.
JP, let's start here. I know you were on the call for Real Salt Lake and Toro FC, the last Champions League game for Real Salt Lake. Just kind of wanted to get your overall impression of this club and the chance, possibility, likelihood, make it what you will, as to Real Salt Lake getting out of their group stage.
Well, first of all, congrats to Real Salt Lake for clinching a spot in the playoffs this weekend in Major League Soccer. I think that, with the CONCACAF Champions League, it's a tough competition, as you guys know, especially when you go away playing these games on the road. Referees' calls don't always go your way. The fields are not that great. Climate, temperature, all of that all weighs in. Having said that, I like the fact that Real was able to come back in the end when it looked like all hope was lost. Saborio, again, providing the big difference. We all wanted that game to mean something at Rio Tinto Stadium. I mean, everybody would be shocked if Taro upset Herediano, so I think everyone was expecting 3 points for Herediano on that night. So I think that the stage is set. Real Salt Lake, I think, has a good shot at it, certainly, because that game is at home, and I think they've got the horses that could do it.
JP, you've seen it all in covering this league essentially since its inception. Give us your thoughts on kind of the new playoff format, a stretch run now where only 10 out of 19 teams will make the playoffs as opposed to 8 out of 10 back in the day.
Yeah.
And what you like or maybe don't like about the wild card game, I guess it's called the knockout game now, the 2-game conference final, and then the cup being held at the site of the highest remaining finisher.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. I like the fact that there's 5 teams in each conference. I wasn't a big fan of the way it was before, where Real Salt Lake could be actually the winner of the Eastern Conference and New York could be the Western Conference champions. I thought that made us look ridiculous as a league. So I'm fine with 5 teams in each division making it. The wild card spot is okay. I just hope at the end of all of this that with the 2-leg playoffs and all, that you'll see a worthy champion. I think there's always an upset, especially in that first round. And when I look at the Eastern Conference, for example, I'm not sure what you'd consider an upset, because regardless of how these teams finish 1 through 5, I mean, how big of an upset would it be if Houston were to play Sporting Kansas City, and they've done well against them this year, and if Houston wins, how big of an upset might that be? You could look at the Western Conference, and it's possible LA could play Real Salt Lake. It's possible that Seattle, Real Salt Lake, LA, 2 of those 3 teams could be involved in an opening round series, and one of the better teams in the league might be eliminated. So I'm not as big a fan of that one. I think the 1-game final is okay. I think that they had to do that, I guess they were saying, because we had a lot of empty seats in Toronto. It takes away from a lot of fans maybe traveling to the games, but I think if you get to an MLS Cup final, I can't think of a city in this league that wouldn't sell it out if their team got as far as that final. But let's shorten the season, guys, huh? Trey, what do you think? Too long? You can't play MLS Cup in December. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you're playing games from March 1st to December 1st, you've got a draft on January 17th, you got preseason on January 20th, and you start again on March 2nd. It's just, there's no, it's a year-round season.
Well, I'll ask you guys this. Is this the start of what we're going to see, an adjustment to this FIFA calendar we've always been hearing about? Are these the baby steps needed to, within the next 5 to 10 years, find ourselves in a similar stature of what maybe a Germany's sitting in or a Scandinavia's sitting in, where they take that little bit of a break during those hardcore winter months?
Wow. The only thing I could see possibly working here is a split season, the way some of the countries do it. I could see that working, but it's tough to sustain media interest if you're going to have a big break. But there's no way in this country that we can play games in December, January, and February. We don't have enough southern or climate-friendly cities. You can't play games in most of these cities when you get to even December, let alone January or February. So I think everything's up for discussion, but I don't think you'll ever see, guys, the way the European calendar or the world calendar runs. I don't think you'll see it work in Major League Soccer. Not at least the strict calendar.
JP, you and I both had conversations with Shaw Simon, and the one thing he's talking about is he wants more games in the summer to take advantage of that heat and humidity, as opposed to losing those home games so early in the season when potentially you're starting a Major League Soccer season with injuries coming off the backside of a longer preseason. You're a man that's play-by-play for the Philadelphia Union. You see the Eastern Conference on a weekly basis. Outside of Sporting Kansas City, because we weren't really surprised in terms of them doing so well because the spine of their team was intact, the majority of their group was intact. Who's been the surprise in the Eastern Conference? Because you and I were talking a couple weeks ago. Montreal, 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, that was a team everyone had to keep their eye on. Now it seems as if Chicago Fire is a team that no one's talking about, and they're sitting on 53 points.
Yeah, I thought Chicago Dunny would be a playoff team. I thought when I saw them earlier this year, and I think they're much better now than when I saw them earlier in the year, but I didn't see them as a second-place team. I saw them more as maybe a fourth-place team, possibly third, but they've made a lot of positive changes that have really helped them out. But when I look at the other teams, I look at all the changes that they've made. Like, look at where New York is right now. I mean, they've got 50 points. They're in third place, tied with DC United. You're looking at a DC United team where, without Dwayne De Rosario, I think everybody figured they were going to go south, and they win 3 straight games. So the Eastern Conference is pretty tough to figure. You'd think that Houston would come in and maybe dominate Philadelphia, and instead, Houston looked very bad, very ordinary yesterday. Union looked very good, but if Houston's going to make the playoffs, that's a game that they need to win. And then you've got Columbus. I would like to start the year with that Columbus team. Once they got Higuain to go with Arrieta, that's a much better team. They're not a sixth-place team, and that's where they are right now. But I think that if the season were to start today, I'd take my chances with that team going much higher.
JP Dellacamera for a couple more minutes with us here in Salt Lake City on Frame. JP, if you were to look on both sides, whether it be the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference, and I know the competition is there, a lot of teams in the thick of the race. Could you peg maybe a sleeper that would not surprise you, that may surprise us, but would not surprise you playing for MLS Cup?
It wouldn't surprise me in the Eastern Conference if Chicago was that team to go into it. And in the Western Conference, you're saying maybe a surprise team? That is a tough one. I think that I don't think there are any sleepers, in the West. I picked LA to win it before the season started. I was like a lot of people, looked very foolish at the beginning of the year when they had that horrific start. I still like LA. They're playing their best soccer now. When the playoffs begin, Omar Gonzalez is not going to be tired. David Beckham, assuming his latest injury is going to be okay because he's rested it, won't be tired. Landon Donovan won't be tired going in. And these guys are going to have momentum. They've got Edson Buttle back. I still think LA is the team overall. I know that's not your question, but I think that overall, I would still pick LA to win MLS Cup.
JP, do you believe, obviously San Jose's had a great year. They've got 60 points with 4 games to play. They're going to end up one of the top probably 2 or 3 points hauls in league history. Is their mode where they've won 50% of their games with game winners in the 90th minute or later, is that sustainable in the playoffs?
I would say it is, only because it's not just one guy. It's really not just Wondolowski. It may be lately, but Alan Gordon's gotten a lot of big goals late. Stephen Lenhart's gotten a lot of big goals late, and they've had other players chipping in with goals as well. But the big thing to me is, as good as San Jose is, what if in the opening round, who are they going to play? If they finish in first place, you have the playoff between the last 2 teams. They're still going to play a good team in the West. They could still lose. As great a season as they've had, they could still lose in the opening round to one of the very good teams in the Western Conference. And it would be unfortunate for them because it looks like they're going to win the Supporters' Shield. But I do think they could sustain that, yes.
JP, you've been around this league for a long time, and you've seen, and I'm not calling you old, it's not a cheap shot.
Thank you.
Just wanted to clarify that. We're always talking about the level of play, the level of quality, the level of star names, and every year it's taking that next step forward. What have you seen that's been the biggest difference over the years in terms of the growth of Major League Soccer. That has just meant the most, top to bottom.
2 words, David Beckham. I think without that signing, we don't see a lot of what has taken place over the last several years. He's opened up so many doors. So many more players have come over here because of him. So much more interest from the media, television, fans. I mean, you name it, everything is up since he came. Expansion fees, a lot of that is a result of him. So I think that if I had to look for the more simple answer, Dunny, I think that's it. I think we still have a ways to go. I'd like to see us. I'd actually like to see us increase the designated players. I'd like to see teams having to pick at least one designated player. I think some teams still haven't joined in that particular plan. And I'd like to see more development of young players. I want to see more Americans get breaks on these teams and get more playing time, similar to what the Mexican players do, to get players acclimated with their national team. So I'd like to see more of that. But I think that the league has made tremendous growth. You can see it. You can see it at every team's level. You can see it in Salt Lake, where there's great atmosphere now in a beautiful stadium, and you've got a contending team every year. So I think that the league is still making steps, and I like where the league is at. It's only 17th year. And they've got some major stars like Beckham, like Thierry Henry, and I think more will be coming. Keep hearing about Frank Lampard.
Well, to follow up on your David Beckham, will he go down as history as Major League Soccer's Pele?
I'm going to say yes. I think every number that you would look at on Beckham would show it's millions and millions of dollars that the league has generated. I just remember the first press conference that they had at the Home Depot Center, and I remember people saying that the coverage that received worldwide, it wasn't just on the sports pages of all the major dailies around the world, but it was on the front page of the news sections. It was television all over the world, and they got more coverage in that one day probably than in their history combined in terms of column inches, television exposure, internet, all of that stuff, and it's grown since then.
Even more than the Lothar Matthäus intro?
What's that?
Even more than the Lothar Matthäus intro?
He had to go there.
I'm kidding. Sorry.
I had to go there.
Yeah. We can name that wasn't a bad name. I wish he had done better. But I think that the Beckham signing in the end, when they write the book on Major League Soccer, I think that's a chapter in and of itself, and I think that's where the league really started to get credibility. Because remember, I mean, David is 37 now. He's played in the league some 5 years, so he was 32 maybe. When he came over.
Yeah.
I'd love to see us sign guys younger than that. 27, 28. I'm not a big fan of signing players that are late 30s. I think that Chicago did well to get what they did out of Blanco, but wish we could have had him 4 or 5 years earlier. But I do think, Dunny, that when you go back 20 years from now, 40 years, 50 years from now, people will still be talking about the signing of David Beckham that really helped the league take a major step. Not to say they couldn't have gotten here at some point without him, but he certainly sped up the process.
JP, we appreciate you making time for us here in Salt Lake. Dunny's looking forward to you guys' next walk coming up this weekend.
Wednesday night.
Wednesday night.
Kansas City.
Okay, Wednesday night. I'm sure Dunny will report on the wonderful walks that he has with you when we do our show again next week. But best of luck to you. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, JP.
See you.
There you go. JP Dellacamera does a great job with NBC and Fox doing their play-by-play. Good walking buddy of our own Brian Dunseth.
Good thing it won't be humid in Kansas City on Wednesday night.
One of the best human beings you could ever come across. He's one of the good dudes.
We got to take a quick break. On the other side, it's time to interact with you, the fan, the listener. You can tweet at us at ESPN 700 James, at Original Winger, and at Real Salt Lake. That's the Twitter address. If you want to dial us up on the phones, you can do that as well. 877-353-0700. Back with more On Frame next, right here on ESPN 700.
I'm going to give it to you straight. You're listening to On Flame, the Soccer Insider Show. To join the program, call 877-353-0700. Now back to the boys on ESPN 700.
And welcome back in. The telephone lines are open, 877-353-0700. James Rust, Brian Dunseth, and Trey Fitz-Gerald with you here on Frame. You can also tweet your questions at us if you want to interact that way. At ESPN 700 James, at Original Winger. That is the new Twitter handle for Brian Dunseth, and at Real Salt Lake. And, Dunny, you had a tweet come through.
Yeah, a little bit earlier, Aaron York tweeted, talk to me about why we play so differently when Fabian is a lead striker versus Sabo. Fabi doesn't play so wide. I'm assuming that he's saying by himself. Well, the big difference is when you have Sabo and you have 6'2", 185 pounds, and you heard Nat earlier talk about Sabo and his strength and his size and how well he does in terms of matching up against guys that are as big as tall as Nat and Jameson Olave. That allows Fabian to kind of gravitate towards that left-hand side. I mean, he is. If you were to define what an Argentine wide player was as forward, that would be a picture of Fabian Espíndola. Because that left foot, the way he likes to find those channels, the way he likes to pull out central defenders, outside backs, he loves to be isolated. He loves to break down players. He loves to find out where the mismatches are. He can't do that if Sabo's not on the field. If Sabo is not on the field, he has to change his role. And that's why you saw him a little bit more centrally. And the other reason is because Paulo Jr. has to get away from big, strong center backs. He's not a post-up striker. So he's got to drop in a little bit more. So it's one of the dynamics why you see Fabian play a little bit more central when Sabo is not on the field. That being said, the playing and movement in terms of what Fabian did against the Portland Timbers and what he did on the road in CONCACAF Champions play, I thought his work rate was phenomenal. I thought his movement off the ball was great. His link-up play was fantastic. Listen, we scored 2 goals off set pieces. We're still looking for that final piece of the puzzle in the run of play. But Fabian is thankfully back and playing very, very well because when he was gone, Sabo was missing something, and you could see the frustration in Sabo's physical appearance and demeanor when Fabian wasn't on the field. And I think that's because, nothing against the players that were filling in for Fabian during that time, but there's a link up. There's a non-speaking understanding between Fabi and Sabo in terms of what they're capable of doing on the field when they're together.
Okay, now we will not see that pairing in our next CONCACAF Champions League game versus Herediano, as Sabarillo will be out due to yellow card suspension. Let's talk Champions League for just a second. Big game tomorrow night between Toro FC of Panama and CS Herediano. Break down kind of the CONCACAF situation for us, Trey, and then we'll kind of look forward to the big matchup here at Rio Tinto Stadium.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, I mean, obviously the best case result for RSL tomorrow would be Toro, which actually moved their league game from yesterday to October 3rd. So after they lost to us, they could, even though they were bounced out of contention, they could concentrate fully on their CONCACAF game. I'm trying to look at the tiebreakers here while I'm talking. So if Toro can go into Herediano, and look, the first game was pretty evenly contested. It was a nice goal by Herediano, like a 25-yard blast in the rain that went just under the crossbar. That would be the best case scenario for RSL is have Herediano come out with a point or 0.
Well, and the thing to think about is, much like how Tauro is playing against Real Salt Lake, they can do the same against Herediano, is that, yeah, they're out. It's not just about pride. But you also have to think about it from a tactical perspective. They changed their league game, so they're preparing for this game. But it's also the fact that they can throw caution to the wind. So, like Tauro sat in for the first 30, 45 minutes and really started to try to figure Real Salt Lake out. The 3 substitutions off the bench were all attacking substitutions. Right. And if you think back to that save where player gets to the byline and Nick Romano just palms it, and it would have been a simple tap in at the back door. Tauro FC is capable of taking risks with no accountability whatsoever. On the flip side of that, Herediano sitting on 6 points plus 2 goal differential. They need to win. They absolutely have to win. So they're going to come in, and while you think they're going to be a little bit more attacking, in reality, they're going to be much more defensively cautious than they would be if this, situation was a little bit more fluid in terms of the matchups and competing of day of game. They know what's at stake. Tauro, they can play the role of knocking them out, and don't think that Tauro, as a Panamanian team, has every intention of trying to do to Herediano what they were trying to do to an American-based Real Salt Lake. It's just a fact, because not only is it club, but you play into the national pride. It's Panama against Costa Rica. So it will be a very, very interesting result. And should Tauro get out of the first 30, 45 minutes without giving up a goal heading into the second 45 minutes, all bets are off. All bets will absolutely be off.
Well, and could you see this as just a very open game and maybe high scoring because of that?
Well, and absolutely. And you're talking about two teams defensively that aren't that strong.
Right.
So, mistakes, will Tauro go with another 17-year-old goalkeeper? What decisions will be made in terms of the approach tactically to the game in terms of formation? All those things come into play. And weather, field, everything comes into play. And, for Herediano, they're not as imposing of a team as Real Salt Lake. Yeah, they got a great goal in the first 45 minutes. Nap Orchard's got a red card. Real Salt Lake was knocking on the door. So, I will be very interested to see when you wake up the next morning what that result is and what Group 2 essentially looks like, also from a goal differential standpoint.
Okay, so let's assume that Herediano wins, right? They have 9 points coming in on October 23rd. We have 6. Yet we still control our destiny. We know we need to win. By how many? So first tiebreaker is head-to-head. So we would be 3 points each, assuming we win on the 23rd. Then it goes superior goal difference between the two tied teams. So, they beat us by 1 down there. We beat them by 1 here. They're even. Then it's aggregate scoring. They beat us by 1 down there. We beat them by 1 here. Away goals. If we win 1-0, again, both teams are at 0. So we're just ticking down the list. Then it's overall goal difference. So if Herediano beats Toro only by 1 goal, a 1-0 win for us on October 23rd gets us through. Any other kind of result, let's say Herediano beats Toro by 2, we have to win by 2, because then it goes to head-to-head goal difference, and obviously they're up 1 on us. We win up 1. We would be even again. So we need to win by multiple goals to go up 1.
And Trey, one of the things we were talking about this entire tournament heading into is that if you're a team that's scoring goals, you find yourself in a much more comfortable situation should this final game, this final matchup in the group stage comes to the situation that Real Salt Lake finds itself in. So by not scoring, like say for a Seattle that's got 6-7 goals in group play, or a Houston Dynamo in a similar situation, you find yourself in a more uncomfortable situation, even though you control your own destiny, and now you face a game without Sabo up top.
So that game will be tomorrow night, Herediano, Toro FC in Costa Rica, and then obviously Herediano coming into Rio Tinto Stadium, that game October the 23rd. We're going to take a quick break. You're tuned into On Frame. Back to wrap things up next right here on ESPN 700.
If you're back to more soccer conversation on Frame, here on your home of RSL, ESPN 700.
Wrapping things up into the home stretch, James Russ, Brian Dunstad, Trey Fitz-Gerald. Real Salt Lake's next match, Saturday night at Chivas, USA. Last time they were in Southern California versus Chivas, 3-0 victory for Real Salt Lake. Dunny, your expectations for the guys on Saturday?
Well, I think for Real Salt Lake, a couple of things. One, it was their last full game performance, their full last 90 minutes, and something that Jason Christ had talked about that's been missing for a while. But this is a Chivas team that hasn't won since July 18th, and 1-0 win over the Portland Timbers. 0 wins, 9 losses, 2 draws, coming off a 1-0 loss in D.C. Some stats to think about: just 1 shot on frame against DC, 58% possession, passed the ball 514 times. A team that's trying to play. The question is, once they get into that final third, can they make something happen? right now a starting 11 that is just all over the shop. They have no consistency, no fluidity whatsoever. And you got to think life is pretty rough on our good friend Robin Fraser nowadays.
8:30 kickoff, 7:30 pregame here on ESPN 700. Thanks to Nelson Rodriguez, JP Dellacamera for joining the program. For Trey, for Dunny, for our producer Trevor, I've been your host James Rust. This is On Frame every Monday, 6 to 8, right here on ESPN.